Chapter 12. Cleaning. 1 month later. For the first 11 years of his life, James had led the same uneventful existence as most other kids. Getting up, going to school, coming home to his mum, going on holiday once a year, or twice if he was lucky. Since his mum died, James had led lots of different lives. In a children's home, training at CHERUB, in a commune with a bunch of hippies, as a trainee drug dealer, and even inside an Arizona prison. But James's favourite was everyday life on campus. He loved his room. He loved the way every mealtime turned into a big gossip session about who'd get punishment laps, who was trying to get off with who, or just busting each other's balls over the football results. Best of all, he liked the messing around. You never knew when a water fight was going to erupt, or when the next floor up would declare war with a bunch of flower bombs. The schoolwork and the training were hard, but at its best, life on CHERUB campus was the most fun James had ever had. Now he'd been ostracised. James found it embarrassing hanging around with nobody to talk to, so he spent a lot of time in his room. Once the backlog of homework was cleared, he read motorbike magazines or played his PlayStation. He hated being shut up in the stuffy room, hearing everyone else having fun, chasing, screaming at each other, slamming doors, and an occasional tantrum when something got out of hand. And the worst thing was knowing that it was his own stupid fault. Cherubs can be sent off on long missions at any time, and when they come back, they're expected to catch up with the schoolwork they've missed. Because of this, every cherub is on an individual curriculum and lessons are taught year-round, Monday through Saturday. The only exceptions are public holidays and the days between Christmas and New Year. So while all the other cherubs got their 5-week turn at the hostel, James went to lessons every single day. He felt like he'd scored a minor victory if he managed to race through his homework in the hour between last lesson and setting off to clean up the mission preparation building. He'd managed on this particular Wednesday, so he was in an okay mood as he left his room. But it didn't last. Bruce stood in the corridor wearing a pair of swimming shorts 3 sizes too small for him. Shaq was looking at Bruce and laughing. "You've got to go into town and buy new ones before we fly off," Shaq giggled. "I don't even know how you got into those things." Bruce stared down at his skinny legs and nodded. "They fitted me okay last year, but I've spent my clothes allowance, so I was wondering if I could borrow your blue ones." Shaq was in the middle of the corridor, blocking James's path to the lift. "Excuse us," James said. Shaq tutted as he backed up to the wall, and Bruce scowled at James with complete contempt. As he waited for the lift, James considered how, a month earlier, he would have been in on the joke. He probably would have got the bus into town with them, cruised the shops, and ended up messing around in Burger King. Things got even more awkward as the lift doors parted, revealing Norman Large standing inside with his head almost touching the plastic ceiling. It was the first time James had seen Large since he'd spoken to the chairman with Dana, setting off a chain of events that had resulted in Mr. Large being demoted to an ordinary instructor. His former assistant, Mr. Speaks, had replaced him as the head of CHERUB training. They didn't make eye contact, and James tried not to think of how effortlessly the giant man could squish him as the lift trundled down to the ground floor. When James arrived at the mission preparation building, he had to lean forward and stare into a lens. A red light scanned his retina for identification, and a coloured label rolled out of a printer as the door clicked open. He got the same freshly printed sticker with his name and photograph on it every day, so he didn't even bother to look as he stuck it to his t-shirt upside down. James had his routine sorted. He'd start off by getting the cleaning cart out of its cupboard. It was a giant contraption, with a dustbin built into one end that went up as high as his chin. There was a mop, bucket, and hoover clipped into the sides, and a rack of shelves, which were stocked with cloths and cleaning sprays. The mission preparation building had a banana-shaped corridor running its entire length, with 20 offices and special equipment rooms off to the sides, and the luxurious offices of the 2 senior mission controllers, Zara Askar and Dennis King, at opposite ends. James started with King's office because he was always out of the building by 5 p.m. The routine was the same in every room. Empty the bins, pick up any dirty cups or plates, wipe any surfaces that weren't covered with junk, vacuum the floor, and finish off with a squirt of air freshener. It wasn't exactly backbreaking, but it got boring when you had to do it every night. Plus, you had to be speedy if you wanted to get 20 offices done, clean and restock 4 bathrooms, vacuum the corridor, and do the washing up inside 2 hours. Even working flat out, James could never get through in much less than 2.25. 90 minutes into the job, James's feet were starting to ache. He'd finished the last of the bathrooms, which was the part of the job he really hated. Getting blanked by his friends and losing his summer holiday was bad, but having to unblock a toilet full of turds and soggy bog roll was easily worst of all. As James threw his disposable gloves and soggy cloths into the rubbish sack on his cart, he heard a tiny giggle. He knew it was Zara Asker's 18-month-old son, Joshua, but that wasn't how you played the game. "Ooh!" Joshua squealed as he jumped out from behind the cart. James theatrically backed up to the wall. "Oh, you scared me! You horrible little monster!" Joshua giggled as he hugged James's leg. "Joshua, monster! Grrr!" "Did you escape from Mummy's office again?" Joshua beamed as James picked him off the floor. His blonde fringe hung over his eyes, and he wore striped dungarees with powdery brown marks all over them. "It looks like you decided to wear that chocolate bar," James said, as he carried the toddler up to the door of Zara's office and knocked. There were a few staff on campus that James liked, but Zara was his favourite. She always worked late, and in the month James had been on cleaning duty, she'd got into the habit of making him a mug of tea partway through his shift. He usually drank it in Zara's office while they had a quick chat. James stepped through the door and put Joshua down on the carpet. He was disappointed to see that Zara had company. "I'll better get on," James said, turning back towards the door. "Actually, James, have you got a minute?" Zara asked. James turned back and studied the woman facing Zara across her desk. She was in her early 30s, with long dark hair and a fit body. "Millie, this is James, the one I was talking about. James, this is Millie Kentner, one of your predecessors at CHERUB." James reached forward to shake her hand, but Joshua snatched James's attention by bashing his boot with a toy car. "Look!" Joshua demanded. James smiled at him. "Is that a new car?" Joshua grinned up at James as Zara explained the situation to Millie. "Hewitt brings Joshua over here while he gives the baby her bath and gets her off to sleep. He's supposed to be visiting Mummy for half an hour before he goes to bed, but James is his hero." Millie gave James a toothpaste advert grin. "Is that right, James?" "I guess," James shrugged as he crouched down and took Joshua's new Lamborghini for a test drive across the carpet. Zara nodded. "From when Joshua first wakes up, all I hear is James, James, James. When you ask Joshua what he's going to do, he makes all this stuff up. Yesterday, he announced that he was going to go fishing with James. He must have seen it on TV, because Hewitt's never taken him fishing." "So, James," Millie smirked, covering her mouth as though she didn't want Zara to hear. "As one cherub to another, how'd you end up on cleaning detail?" "I got in a fight," James said awkwardly. Zara smiled. "Well, that's not exactly true, is it, James?" "I don't know. Isn't it?" "Get this," Zara grinned as she pointed at James. "The silly muppet got himself dumped by his girlfriend, so he storms out and thumps the first person he sees. A little scrap of an 11-year-old kid." Millie put her hands over her mouth. "Oh my God," she smiled. "James, how could you? And you're so sweet with Joshua." James felt awkward and dumb, even though he realised Millie was trying to be nice. "So, like I said," Zara interrupted, "young James has some very good mission experience, but right now he's down in the dumps. His friends have all given him the boot, he's lost his summer holiday, and the only way he'll get out of cleaning duty is if I send him on a mission. Millie nodded. I'll take whoever I can get. This is just a favour, really. I can sort out accommodation, and I doubt it will take any more than a month. Zara explained to James. After retiring as a CHERUB agent, Millie joined the Metropolitan Police. She works as a community officer in East London, and she's having a few problems with one of the local villains. It's textbook CHERUB stuff. Move into the neighbourhood with another agent, hang out with the villain's kids, try getting involved in his home life and business, etc., etc. I'll have to type up a proper mission briefing and get ethics committee approval, but I assume you're interested? James nodded enthusiastically. I don't care what the mission is if it means I don't have to stick my hand down another toilet. Zara smiled. I thought you might say that. Chapter 13. Classified. Classified. Mission briefing for James Adams. This document is protected with a radio frequency identification tag. Any attempt to remove it from the mission preparation building will set off an alarm. Do not photocopy or make notes. Millie Kentner. Millie Kentner was born in 1971. She served as a CHERUB agent from 1981 to 1988, retiring with a black shirt after 11 missions. Her role in the 1985 miners' strike has been described as one of the most outstanding performances by a CHERUB agent ever. Millie left for Sussex University where she studied forensic science. In 1992, she joined the Metropolitan Police and her career was fast-tracked, enabling her to obtain the rank of inspector within 4 years. Following this promotion, Millie transferred from the Serious Crime Squad to a role in charge of a community policing unit, covering the area of East London that includes the Palm Hill estate. Palm Hill is still notorious for riots that took place there in 1981, but today the area has many affluent residents and crime is below the London average. Millie Kentner's work with the Palm Hill community over the last 9 years has been credited for much of this change. In 2002, she turned down the offer of promotion to Chief Inspector and the opportunity to head a London-wide task force designed to specifically target London's crime black spots. She wanted to continue working in Palm Hill. The brothers Tarasov. Leon and Nikola Tarasov were born somewhere in Russia in the early 1950s. Nikola was believed to be 1 year older than his brother, although their exact ages are uncertain. After serving in the Russian Navy, both young men took jobs as fishermen. In August 1975, their factory trawler suffered a dual-engine failure while fishing for cod in the North Sea. Following a distress call, a British lifeboat safely evacuated all 42 crew members with assistance from the Norwegian Navy. Upon landing in Britain, Leon and Nikola were among 8 members of the crew who requested asylum. After government officials failed in their attempts to persuade the 8 sailors to return home and avoid a diplomatic row with the USSR, the British government reluctantly accepted their asylum requests. After failing to find work aboard a British fishing vessel, Leon and Nikola gravitated towards the small Russian community centred around Bow in East London. The brothers worked a string of undesirable jobs, driving minicabs, working in hotel kitchens, and portering in hospitals. It is also believed they became increasingly involved in illegal activities. In 1979, Nikola was tried and convicted of stealing more than £2,000 in cash from a minicab office where he had worked the previous summer. He was sentenced to 3 months in prison. Palm Hill riots. Upon his release, Nikola declared himself homeless and broke and was allocated a 2-bedroom flat in a rundown section of the Palm Hill estate. Leon moved in with him, and they continued much as before, earning their keep with a mixture of low-paid work, dodgy dealing, and small-time criminal activity. But their financial status would be changed forever by the Palm Hill riots. On the night of the 13th of July 1981, the Palm Hill riots kicked off when police stopped and arrested a youth as he got out of a stolen car. Witnesses claimed that the arresting officers assaulted the youth as he was handcuffed and put into the back of a police car. An angry mob gathered, undoubtedly encouraged by a wave of urban violence that had spread across the country following the Brixton riots 3 months earlier. Bricks and bottles were thrown, then the police car was surrounded. The officers were dragged out of their vehicles and beaten by the mob before they got a chance to radio for help. As darkness fell, youths and police fought running battles in the streets and alleyways around the Palm Hill estate. More than 20 shops were looted, hundreds of windows smashed, cars vandalised, and a block of 60 garages at the back of the estate was completely burned out. It took police more than 8 hours to restore order. Government grants. In the aftermath of the riots, the government hatched a compensation scheme, because riots are not covered by insurance, and pledged to spend money regenerating Palm Hill. Leon and Nikola Tarasov realised that this was a golden opportunity. The brothers had been dealing in second-hand cars and had lost 5 of them in the burned-out garage block. The government compensated the brothers generously for their cars. By some estimates, they received more than 4 times what the cars were truly worth. Unable to believe their luck, Leon and Nikola used the compensation money to buy the lease on a derelict pub and an adjoining plot of land at the edge of the Palm Hill estate. Using a mixture of government grants and subsidised redevelopment loans, they refurbished the pub and turned the land into a second-hand car dealership. Small time. Although neither venture was wildly successful, the government money enabled the Tarasov brothers to wear suits and describe themselves as local businessmen to the TV crews who occasionally turned up to report on the aftermath of the riots. Over the following years, the Tarasovs ran their businesses with a complete lack of respect for the law. They were investigated for unpaid taxes, and on more than one occasion, stolen car parts and vehicles were found on their lot. Another raid uncovered a cache of fake vehicle tax discs. Leon and Nikola claimed that the discs had been left behind by a former employee and were found not guilty by a jury after a 3-day trial at Bow Crown Court. Their pub, the King of Russia, quickly became a notorious hangout for petty criminals. It is known around Palm Hill as a place where you can easily buy drugs or stolen goods, drink after hours, or settle in for an illegal all-night poker game. The Tarasov Dynasty. Until recently, the Tarasov brothers led remarkably parallel lives. They both married in 1985 and spawned a son and daughter. Leon married Sacha Arkady. Sonia was born in 1989, now 16, and Maxim in 1991, now 13, and known as Max. Nikola married Paula Randall. Their children are Petra, born in 1986, now 18, and now known as Pete, and Lisa, who was born in 1990, now aged 14. Paula Tarasov left Nikola and her children in 2000 and remarried shortly afterwards. After a prolonged bout of ill health, Nikola Tarasov died of pneumonia in December 2003. Custody of his children was awarded to Leon, without any contest from the children's mother. Leon and Sacha currently share 2 adjoining flats on the Palm Hill estate with their son, daughter, niece, and nephew. Money. Leon Tarasov fell apart in the aftermath of his brother's death. He drank heavily. The pub and car dealership were both in debt, and there were rumours that Leon had run up a large gambling debt with a serious underworld figure. Many believe that it was only a matter of time before Leon lost his businesses. The Palm Hill police were among those relishing the imminent demise of Leon Tarasov. Tarasov had been a thorn in the side of the law, both through his own illegal activities and through the fact that his pub provided a hangout for other criminals. An internal police memo described Leon Tarasov as a man keen to portray himself as a community leader, but in actuality, Tarasov's criminality is a cancer that undermines much good work done by others in the neighbourhood. Leon is believed to be heavily involved in local crime and fencing stolen goods. He was suspected of running a protection racket amongst local shopkeepers for a number of years. More recently, he has become involved in a violent turf with a nearby community of travellers. But by the end of 2004, Tarasov's luck had changed for the better. He'd caught up with payments on all his loans, purchased a new car, and snapped up the lease on a pub at the north end of the Palm Hill estate. He spent a significant sum refurbishing this second pub before renaming it the Queen of Russia. Over the past year, the joke around Palm Hill has been that Tarasov has either won the lottery or robbed a bank. Having established that Leon did not win the lottery, the police are anxious to find the real source of Tarasov's newfound wealth. The CHERUB mission. Leon Tarasov has succeeded in avoiding anything other than a modest court fine in more than 30 years of dubious activity. He keeps his affairs close to his chest, and all attempts at using police informants and undercover operations have failed. The thousands of hours wasted on trying to catch Leon Tarasov have made the Palm Hill police increasingly reluctant to put any more effort into nailing him. Millie Kentner has become frustrated with her colleagues' lack of enthusiasm and has asked if her old friends at CHERUB would be able to help out. 2 experienced CHERUB agents will move into a vacant flat on the same landing as the Tarasov family. The younger agent, James Adams, 13, will target Max and Lisa. The older agent, Dave Moss, 17, will target Sonia and Pete. Dave will pose as Dave Holmes, a young man who has recently been released from foster care. James will pose as his younger brother, who is still in care, but who has been allowed to move in with him. Senior Mission Controller Zara Asker will organise the mission, while Millie Kentner will run the operation on a day-to-day basis. Mission Objectives. 1. To infiltrate the Tarasov family unit and try to obtain as much evidence as possible about criminal activity. 2. To infiltrate Leon Tarasov's business, in particular his car dealership, which is believed to be the hub of his criminal activities. 3. The main goal is to try and uncover the source of Leon Tarasov's recent financial good fortune. The CHERUB Ethics Committee accepted this mission briefing without reservation. This mission has been classified low risk. Experienced agents will be allowed to operate without close supervision from a mission controller.